Tonight, Britain is witnessing a moment that will be replayed for decades. A moment of such political shock that even veteran correspondents are struggling to describe what they have just seen. Within the walls of Parliament, under the glare of broadcast cameras, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom was escorted from the chamber, not by colleagues, not by aides, but by security officers. It is an image already being called the most dramatic scene in modern British political history. And as you watch what unfolded, remember to subscribe to Starscope News for continuing coverage of events shaping our country. Moments before the confrontation erupted, the House of Commons appeared entirely normal. It was just after midday. Prime Minister's questions had begun, the benches full, the atmosphere brisk but routine. Yet within minutes, that ordinary session would collapse into chaos that no one present, MPs, staff, or viewers, had anticipated. The catalyst came not from a backbencher or a surprise intervention but from the Reform UK leader, Nigel Farage, who rose slowly, deliberately, and with a composure that would later be replayed frame by frame across every global news network. His question began calmly enough, but the details were forensic and delivered with a precision that carried an unmistakable charge. He cited leaked immigration files, rising channel crossings, cancelled deportation flights, soaring accommodation costs, and, most explosively, reports of confidential discussions with Brussels. For a moment, the chamber fell into a tense stillness. The Prime Minister sat unmoving, his expression tightening with each sentence. This was not political theatre, it was a direct, detailed indictment delivered live and unfiltered. Farage ended with a question that felt less like a query and more like a strike. When, he asked, would the Prime Minister admit his policies had failed? What followed defied precedent. Before the Speaker had even called on him, the Prime Minister admit his policies had failed. What followed defied precedent. Before the Speaker had even called on him, the Prime Minister rose abruptly to his feet. His anger was immediate, sharp, and wholly uncharacteristic. His voice, already raised, cracked as he accused Farage of spreading division and hatred. MPs looked on stunned. This was not a typical parliamentary clash. This was a Prime Minister losing his composure in front of millions. The Speaker repeatedly ordered him to resume his seat. Each instruction was ignored. And as the Prime Minister leaned forward again, his voice rising, the chamber's tension grew almost palpable. Then, in a move unseen in centuries of Commons history, the Speaker invoked Standing Order 43. An order so rare and so severe that even long-serving MPs needed a moment to process what had just happened. Security officers were called to escort the Prime Minister from the chamber. The Prime Minister stared in disbelief before being guided toward the exit as cameras flashed relentlessly. Outside Parliament, the footage spread instantly. Within minutes, the hashtag, PM thrown out, was trending across social media. International outlets cut into programming to broadcast the clip. And as the shockwaves grew, political consequences began to unfold at extraordinary speed. Polling plunged overnight, with voters describing the incident as unprofessional, unstable, and alarming. Even lifelong Labour supporters voiced concern. Meanwhile, Reform UK's website buckled under sudden traffic surges and donations. By evening, Farage addressed the media in a calm, measured tone that contrasted sharply with the Prime Minister's earlier outburst. He spoke of leadership, composure, and responsibility. The clip went viral before midnight, climbing past tens of millions of views. Commentators on every network described the moment as a political earthquake. Behind closed doors, Labour MPs convened emergency conversations. Reports emerged that senior cabinet ministers had privately confronted the Prime Minister, urging him to apologise. He refused. Words leaked from inside Number 10 painted a picture of a leadership under immense strain. One recording from a late-night meeting captured the Prime Minister in a heated exchange, declaring he would never bow to Farage or to what he described as destabilising forces. But one leaked sentence cut deeper than all others: "I am not the problem. Britain is the problem." It became the headline of the next morning's newspapers. Pressure intensified. Senior Labour MPs began to publicly urge the Prime Minister to consider his position. Hours later, the Speaker announced he had referred the Prime Minister's behaviour to the Parliamentary Standards Commissioner, a move with no modern precedent. Markets reacted instantly. The pound fell sharply, and political analysts warned of a full-scale government crisis. Then came the resignations. First 5 cabinet ministers, then more. Crowds gathered outside Downing Street chanting for the Prime Minister to go. Officers erected additional barriers as the situation grew volatile. Inside Number 10, advisors worked frantically to contain the fallout, but events were already overtaking them. Late that evening, the Prime Minister was moved to a secure room inside Downing Street as protests swelled outside. Rumours spread of heated arguments inside government offices. Meanwhile, Reform UK held its largest ever rally, capitalising on public frustration and positioning itself as the nation's emerging alternative. But the night's most extraordinary development came when the Prime Minister was ushered into a government vehicle under police escort and driven through central London. Not to Parliament. Not to Labour headquarters. But to Buckingham Palace. The nation watched in disbelief as the car slipped through the palace gates shortly after midnight. No statement was issued. No explanation given. Only speculation, questions, and the palpable sense of constitutional gravity. Inside the palace, staff moved with quiet urgency. A royal source later revealed only 5 words: the king was not pleased. What was discussed in that private audience remains unknown, but the Prime Minister emerged looking hollow, drained, and visibly shaken. His return to Downing Street was silent. Government phones lit up at 1:30 in the morning with a message announcing the Prime Minister would address the nation at 7 o'clock. For many, sleep was impossible. Britain woke early, watching live as the Prime Minister stepped before the cameras. He confirmed his meeting with the King and insisted he would not resign. But within minutes, the backlash from his own party intensified. Tweets, statements, resignations, all pouring in simultaneously. By noon, 14 cabinet ministers had stepped down. 35 Labour MPs signed a letter demanding the Prime Minister's immediate departure. And then came the poll that reshaped the day. Nearly 70% of the country now believed the Prime Minister was no longer mentally fit to lead. Social media exploded. Parliamentary journalists declared the government to be effectively collapsing in real time. As night fell, Labour's internal machinery moved with historic speed. MPs gathered in committee rooms, voices rising, papers slamming, emotions running high. These were not opposition parties plotting against a government, these were the Prime Minister's own MPs arguing that he had become a liability. Angela Rayner entered, and the room fell silent. When she spoke, she delivered the sentence that sealed the Prime Minister's fate: he had lost the confidence of the Parliamentary Labour Party. A vote would be held at 5 o'clock. Outside Parliament, Nigel Farage addressed a crowd of thousands. He stated plainly that if a general election were called, he would stand to become Prime Minister. That declaration reverberated across Westminster. At precisely 27 minutes past 5, the vote concluded. Rayner stepped before the microphones and announced the result: the Parliamentary Labour Party had voted to remove the Prime Minister as leader. He would be asked to resign. Inside Number 10, the Prime Minister was informed. His reaction was visible from the street: shoulders slumped, expression broken. His premiership was over. But Britain now faces larger questions. Who leads next? Does a new Labour leader form a government? Is a general election inevitable? And what will the King do as the constitutional implications become unavoidable? For the first time in generations, the path to Number 10 is wide open. And Nigel Farage, long dismissed as a political outsider, now stands closer to the doors of Downing Street than at any point in his career. This story is still unfolding, with consequences that will shape Britain's future for years. To follow every development as it happens, subscribe to Starscope News and stay with us as we continue to report the events transforming the nation before our eyes.